Let there be light and welcome to Living Essence. I'm Sarantarananda. Today I'm doing a video to share with you on how to track the ego. The ego is the collection of all your thoughts, memories, feelings, all the things you've learnt, as well as it's structured by society and culture. It's interesting when we look at the word culture, it's the very same place in which we derive the word cult. And what is a cult? A cult is a gathering of people which is under the control of a small number or a leader. And it is a functioning under an ideology. And this is exactly what the ego is. It is living on ideology all the time. And ideologies can be very, very dangerous because they are simply a regurgitation of memory, understanding, experience, and again, the culture, the society. It is taking in the information of the structures around the one that is experiencing and filing it down, and then coming to the point of believing that it is this consciousness, this awareness, being fooled into the idea that it is the data that it's collected. When I say data, I'm talking memories, feelings, and the society that it understands. So a good way of looking at the ego is it is data. It is collected data. Now, if you took a photo of yourself, which is data, and you were to look at this photo and you said, this is me, and you were all taken up by this is me, and you were projecting and attaching yourself to this is me, well, it's a representation of you, but it is certainly not you. To be identified with this lower vibrational form of yourself is to be in the ego. The ego looks at the form and believes it is it. The ego is the trickiest and sneakiest thing you'll have to deal with, because everything in the world that we experience on this earth is ego. The ego is the inner society, and the society is the outer ego. When you look at it, society is a construct, it is an ideology. And there are many different types of societies, as there is just as many different types of ego. But when you sum it all the way down, you can say, well, society is a structure, and so is the ego. We construct a society within ourselves, and it is governed on the data it has brought in. So if you've had experiences with a dog in which you've been bitten, from there on there's been a template laid down, and the data has been proven to you that dogs are dangerous. It'll take quite a bit to convince the ego that they're not. You'll have to have enough experiences, enough data, more data, to prove that dogs aren't dangerous. So the ego is a believing construct, and it is a collection of data, but it is not what you are. To be attached to the ego is like looking at a photo and believing you are the one in the photo. Consciousness, however, is that which is simply aware. It is not identified. It simply sees what is. Again, I want to say that again. It is not identified. And in psychology, we have the word the id, which is the ego. It's your identity. When you think about it, ego simply is identity. Whatever you identify with is an ego action. And so what the ego is always attempting to do is to prove that it's real, because the ego is not. It is simply the data collected and believed. It is the data collected and believed and acted upon. That's attachment to that which you have collected, that's which you have experienced, that which you feel and think that you are. Yet, you are not what you feel and what you think you are that which is aware of what you are feeling and what you think you are. So we can't escape the ego. The ego is here because we are having a human experience. And to have a human experience, we must have an ego. But the ego is to serve us. The ego must serve us. I want to say that again. The ego is there to serve us. But we've fallen into the trap of serving the ego. It's like serving the data instead of the data serving us. So, in consciousness, we're here to experience the incoming data, whether it be the vibration of sound or sight, feelings, touch, taste, and smell. All the 5 sense perceptions, as I've mentioned in previous videos. But you are not the 5 sense perception. Remember, you are not here to try and prove that you are these things. When you can stand back and know that you are simply that which is aware of the experience, then you can truly get down to the nuts and bolts of what it is you're learning. We can only understand the human experience through the 5 sense perceptions, and we can only understand sensing through being a human. And that's what we're here to do. Our consciousness experiencing sense. That's it. Our consciousness experiencing sense. So how do we navigate through this life without allowing the ego to come in and rule the situation? Because really you must remember the most primary thing, the most important thing is that you are consciousness. You are that which is conscious. And the ego is to serve you, to bring in the data, to collect the data, but not to be fooled into the idea, into the culture, and that's what it is, culture, that we are the data. You are not the data. It's there to serve you. So it wouldn't make sense for the tail to wag the dog, as we say. So to get things into perspective, we must understand, what does the ego do? Well, we've been taught to prove ourselves. Through schooling, we're taught to prove that we've learned reading. We've taught to prove that we've understood mathematics. We've taught to prove that we know our English or language or whatever it is that we are learning. We are always proving ourselves, and that brings solidification and identification to the ego. But consciousness does not need to prove itself, because consciousness is what it is and always has been, always will be. Consciousness is like the pure sky. The ego is like the clouds that comes and goes. So if we get identified with the clouds, we're going to have all sorts of emotions ruling our life and controlling us. But when you understand that you are the pure sky that has clouds in it that will come and go, you can relax and know that you can experience and enjoy. And that's the main thing. So how do we track the ego? Well, a wise person once said to me, everything to share and nothing to prove. You see, proving yourself is ego. And you've been taught by society and culture to prove yourself. You must prove yourself through all of your schooling, as even before you get to school, you're proving yourself. You begin to prove yourself to your parents. You even start trying to prove yourself to yourself. This is mine. I own that. Give that to me. Me. This, all the identification of the body. And then anxiety builds up around what your attachments are. So we must drop the attachments. How do we do that? Again, we track the ego. To track the ego in real time will help you keep things into perspective. So if you ever find yourself trying to prove yourself, prove your validity, prove your worthiness, then you are an ego. But if you find that you are sharing simply out of the experience of who you are and the expression of who you are, if you are sharing without an attachment to your knowledge and understanding, then you are in the soul seat. You are in your heart. So being in the soul seat is vitally important to bring perspective to this experience that we're having, the spiritual experience, the soulful experience within a body. We are embodied, and like a dog that has a tail and can wag the dog, that's the right way. But we don't want the tail to wag the dog. Let the ego try to keep proving to us that it's real. We can say, I have an ego, it's here to protect my physical body and mind and experience on this earth in my incarnate state. But ultimately, that will pass away and I will always be consciousness. When you understand that you are the consciousness that is conscious, you can relax more and not take this life so seriously and find your being is simply who you are. Just being. Not your doing, not your thinking, not your actions, but your being is your truest expression and experience of the self. So, if you find yourself in the state of proving, having to prove, there you go. There's the ego. Track it. Watch it. What are you trying to prove? There is nothing to prove. Okay? And it's okay if you do need to prove yourself at work or prove yourself in competition. Realize that it is simply ego. If you win or lose, it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of consciousness. Come back to understanding that I am that which is conscious of what's happening. Whether I win or lose, it really doesn't matter. Whether I find love or lose love, really doesn't matter, because I am love. I am not the data that I am collecting. And you can come back to center and be stable in your human experience. And when you find yourself sharing, then you are definitely sitting in the soul seat. Remember, ego is always trying to prove itself, but soul simply shares. It is sharing. It realizes everything that's coming in is also be given back out, just like the breath. The breath is a beautiful analogy for the soul. It draws in and it sends out. It receives and it returns. That is how to track the soul. That's when you know that you are in your soul. You are receiving and returning. There's nothing to hold on to. There's nothing to identify with, keep, or feel that you have ownership of. You are that you are. And all experience will come in and go out like a tide. It's very, very natural. The soul is natural, and nature teaches us the different ways to be natural. But the ego is very unnatural. It wants to own, it wants to command and control. So when you find yourself commanding, controlling, owning, and trying to prove yourself, realize that you have identified yourself as identifying with the ego. You are not your ego. You are that which is conscious. Come back home, back to the heart. Everything to share and nothing to prove. I'm sending you all so much love, and let there be light.